Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Rachel Bergquist, and I'm the Programming and Outreach Coordinator at the Squamish Public Library. I am so honored to welcome you all here tonight to Namwayut, an evening with Chief Robert Joseph. And I'm welcoming you on behalf of the Squamish Public Library, the Whistler Public Library, the Pemberton and District Public Library, the Whistler Writers Festival, Squamish Nation, Squamish Arts, and the Whistler Pemberton Literacy Partnership. So, thank you. And hello to everybody tuning in online. I think I'm looking at the camera. And to everybody who's tuning in from the Whistler Public Library and the Pemberton and District Public Library tonight. To start this event, I want to honor that this land that we're gathered on here tonight is the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Ohomeo, known in English as the Squamish Nation. This territory includes all of Atkatsum, Howe Sound, Burrard Inlet, and English Bay, as well as the rivers and creeks that flow into these bodies of water and the various islands in Atkatsum. Squamish place names exist throughout this territory. In many instances, a place has meaning because of the oral traditions that explain that place in terms of Squamish relationship to the land. One Squamish legend, why the salmon come to Squamish waters, is told in visual graphics by Squamish Nation artist Siobhan Joseph all around the Squamish Library's windows. And I just want to welcome you all to the library and invite you to come look at that art. It's beautiful, and you can read the full legend in the library as well. Chen Kwenmantomi, thank you so much for being here. Just a reminder to silence your cell phones. And there's going to be time for questions at the end. Tatiana is going to be running around with the microphone, so keep those in mind as we go. Okay, and now it is my honor to turn it over to Gwawaenuk's Linda Williams.
I'd like to ask everyone to stand for a blessing, please. Halthan Squaloin, Quea, Cla, Knamat Cla, Squamish Ohomeo. Gwawaenuk Gwawaenuk, Quea Kushaman, Linda Williams, Queen Sna. Chankomantomia, Chelsea and Kakakanik, for blessing us with this beautiful day today. Chankomantomia for all the ones who traveled safely here today for this beautiful event. We ask Chelsea for continued blessings for this wonderful man, Chief Bobby Joe, and all of our elders and his family that travel with him. We ask that you continue to hold him up in beauty and strength, understanding, and gratitude for the work that he is meant to do in this lifetime. Keep him safe and always in your loving care. Jenkomantomia, for the strength that he has for sharing his story, so that we may also learn from his and others' stories that they experienced in their lifetime. Jenkomantomia Chelseam, I hope.
Thank you.
Good evening, and welcome everyone to this event, to our chief, our elders, our local leadership who are out there, My name is Gwawaenuk, Christine Baker, and my parents are Bobby Baker and the late Pauline, and my grandparents are Joe Baker and Christine Cook, and Harry B. and Mary Nixon. So my family is part of our guest family as well. Tonight we are blessed to have the author of this book, Namwayut, A Pathway to Reconciliation, Chief Dr. Robert Joseph, and it's going to be difficult for me to say his ancestral name, Quin Hua Laji Wakias, the mighty thunder momental river. He's a true peace builder whose life and work are examples of his personal commitment. He is a hereditary chief of the Gwawaenuk First Nation, and he has many achievements. He's honorary doctorate of law from UVic, where my granddaughter actually is studying right now. The Order of Canada for his dedication to the contribution to this country and to us. He has the Inspired Life Achievement Award. He's appointed to the Order of British Columbia, BC's highest honor. He was presented the Diamond Jubilee Medal by the Governor General of Canada, and he also received an honorary doctorate law degree from UBC. And he also been recognized as the 50 most powerful people in Vancouver by Vancouver Magazine. So you are looking at a doctor, lawyer, and a chief, and many other accomplishments. Chief Joseph has dedicated his life to bridging the differences brought by the intolerance and lack of understanding and racism at our home and abroad. His insights into the destructive impact of our people's lives, families, cultures are shaped and shared by his experiences with Canada's Indian residential school system. He is one of the speakers of the Kwakwaka'wakw language. He's inspirational when he's speaking at our ceremonial big house. He shares his knowledge and wisdom at all these big houses for many years, and I know this because I've attended through my own healing journey, and one of my sons, Robert, is one of the speakers as well. Chief Joseph is currently the Ambassador of Reconciliation Canada and is a member of the National Assembly for First Nations Elders Council. As a former Executive Director of Indian Residential School Survivors Society, he was an honorary witness to Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, dyslexia. And he was there for the apology of the Prime Minister Harper, in which my father Kawales, Hamtia, and Auntie Gwen were there present as well. As a true leader and ambassador, he has had the opportunity to sit with the leaders from South Africa, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Mongolia, Washington, D.C., to learn from and share his understanding of faith, hope, and healing and reconciliation. With that, we are honored that he can join us and talk about his book and his inspiration. So please welcome Chief Robert Joseph, OCM.
That's long. That's so long. And really hard to try to live up to some of that introduction every time. I've just had the good fortune to be around when opportunity arose to be a part of some really good things that have been happening in this country for the last 10 years. And prior to that, prior to the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, during COVID, I decided I wanted to write a book, and this is the result of my efforts. The book is called Namwayut. It means one with each other. We are all one, no matter what faith, what creed, what color, what race we are. We have to begin to go back to the beginning and realize that we're one humanity. How do we begin to tear down the walls of discrimination, wrongful assumptions, hatred, all of those things that divide us? It's just far too rampant in our country. It shouldn't be. I think that Canada is probably one of the best countries in the world, and I think that by and large, compared to many other countries, its citizens like you are enlightened people who know the difference between right and wrong and wanting to do better. A number of years ago, I had colon cancer, and I ended up in St. Paul's Hospital, and I had surgery. So while that was going on, I called my daughter Karen, my oldest daughter, to come and see me. I had something really important I wanted to talk to her about. So she did. She dropped by and we talked, and I said, there's something I really want you to do for me. I want you to create the biggest walk that's ever been held in Vancouver. Of course we didn't achieve that, but that was my goal. And so she said, of course, Dad, I can do that. And she solicited the help of a brilliant young accountant from one of the big firms in Vancouver, and they began to put together a proposal to finance a big walk. And in doing so, in the planning, they realized that if this walk is to be done, people should really understand why the walk, what does it mean, and what do people expect from those who turn out to walk. And so as a result of that, a month or two before the actual walk, we decided we would engage many groups in society, LGBTQ2, all the races, all the colors, the faith-based people, young people, old people, everybody people. And we held talks about this walk and why it was required. And lo and behold, when the day came for the walk, 70,000 people showed up. That's pretty good for a bunch of amateurs putting together a walk for the first time. So I knew instinctively, as a result of that number, that Canada was probably fertile ground for thinking about new ways forward together, us, we the people, and that we could probably do this in truth and reconciliation. At the same time, the government and the national organizations were negotiating agreements to resolve the Indian residential school legacy and other things. And I was fortunate that I was invited to all of those meetings. I think I sat on every major committee that there ever was on Indian residential schools. And I took my appointment really seriously. And I knew that even though I wasn't trained in any way to be in that kind of position, that I had to do my absolute best. And so the first thing I discovered, if we're going to reconcile in this country, I discovered that we need to talk to each other. We need to have dialogue. We need to create understanding. And then I realized that if we could do that, transformation would take place. We would see each other differently, hear each other differently, react to each other differently, and all of a sudden, there were manifestations of our common humanity. And that hadn't been talked about for a very, very long time. And now we're 10 years down the road since the Truth and Commission report, and there's been a lot of goings on in Canada with respect to truth and reconciliation. Change is happening as we gather this evening. Lots of change. And nobody seems to be reporting it out so that we all know and we realize the benefit of truth and reconciliation processes. But I know I've sat in some boardrooms with some really, really high up people, deputy ministers, CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the country. And they were all talking like we're talking. What is reconciliation? What do we do? How do we engage? And there's no blueprint for it. There's no prescribed way to do reconciliation. So the next step as well is to open your hearts and your minds, and you listen with your heart and your soul, and you share what you have for feedback, and that's when that understanding begins to take place. I'm so blessed that I've seen it from my vantage point. I've talked to groups of people, civil society across the country, and everybody has their definition of reconciliation, and that's good. There is no one way to create reconciliation. The very thought that you have in your mind right now about what you think reconciliation is a really good step. Hold on to it, think about it, talk to your neighbors about it, your family members, and broaden that understanding of what reconciliation means. When we started off, I thought, how could I get to the young Indigenous people in this country, because I really care for them. And the idea struck me, I do know how to get to them. They have to know that within the context of our own culture, Indigenous culture, everything was about balance and harmony and interconnectedness. Isn't that reconciliation? So if we use that same framework and we talk to these young Indigenous people, it begins to break through that we have an obligation, a sacred obligation to advance reconciliation. And as I moved around the country, the north, the south, everywhere, I realized that Canada was listening and watching too, and thinking the same thing. Not everybody, but enough so that there was momentum growing. So that the idea that it was even possible for us to mend our broken relationships, mitigate the hatred and the harm and the abuse, and eventually begin to talk about how we might be able to forgive each other and reach out to each other to reconcile in our own ways at home, in our communities where you live, began to sink in my mind that that was possible too. All I'm really saying is that when it comes to reconciliation, there is nothing impossible if you're willing to acknowledge your fellow person, fellow man, fellow woman, children and all, that they're human like you. All of us are born into value, into purpose. All of us love and are loved. And we all want peace and joy and happiness and inclusion and equality. All of those things became evident in my mind, that we could actually probably become the best country in the world. We could lead this movement and have others watching us as we grow and develop and we multiply the number of people who care for and love each other. It's not hard to imagine. You know, I've been watching what's going on south of the border for a while now, and it's been horrible. And we have the luxury of not being there yet, and we have the privilege of being able to mitigate that and make sure we never go there. That everybody who's ever born in this country, everybody who ever belonged from birth to this country, feel loved, feel included, feel value. And those are just sort of the overall general themes of why reconciliation is so important beyond the politics. I don't want to see us simply reconcile politically or simply economically. Those things can be done without even talking about reconciliation. What I want is a shift in our hearts and our minds and our soul and our spirit that says we can learn to love each other, care for each other. And so I wrote this book wanting to capture everything I felt. And I wrote this book because I thought I had the moral authority to tell my story. And it's just me, just my story, nobody else's. But if I could tell this story and allow myself to be vulnerable, to tell you the most difficult secrets of my life, the really hard experiences, you might listen, you might hear something. And that's why I wrote the book. So I've never done a reading. I'm wondering, how many have, see, I'm taking a real risk here. How many have bought the book? Oh, that's okay. Okay, so we'll pick a chapter. Anybody want to pick a chapter that made some impact on you? Any chapter, you pick it.
How about the one where you dropped off at the school?
Oh, is that? Oh, you got to call it by number, and even though it's my book, I can't. Okay.
Number 3, chapter 3.
Is that vision? How about vision? The chapter 1. Okay, I'll do chapter 1. I was up before everyone else was awake. I didn't want the others to see me in my hopelessly wretched condition. Slinking out of the bunk as quietly as I could, I made my way through the engine room on the boat, climbed the ladder to the galley, and stepped onto the outside deck. Running to the stern, I flung myself behind the huge seine drum. I couldn't see much beyond my tears. I heard myself saying, "God, help me." It wasn't intended to be a prayer. I had been angry with the Creator for a while. There were no other boats around. Over the gunwales, I turned my head toward the shores on the far side of the water. My eyes cleared up even as I slouched behind the drum. As I gazed out at the body of water from Greensea Bay, I knew intuitively what was unfolding before me was supernatural. There was an energy swirling through the water itself, radiant coral, bright blue colors that I'd never seen before. All of the brilliant and dark shades of life together, limitless, unfolding beneath the waves. I lifted my head, suddenly staring at the forest of Vancouver Island in utter awe. The forest was rich and dense, its green foliage simmering with lightning bolts rippling through it from shadow to light. It had a lush green veneer with impenetrable density, revealing its grandeur and power. There was so much energy everywhere, cradled in each leaf. Finally, I gazed into the heavens. The sky was filled with darkness and light. I saw the moon, the stars, and the sun. I had glimpses of the galaxy. For a brief moment, I observed Mother Earth. All of creation was unfolding before my eyes. I had no idea how long I must have been there, watching, feeling in awe, in silence. But the vision ended as a voice saying to me, "In spite of what you have done to yourself, you are a part of all of this, and I love you." When I was a little boy in that school, all of us little boys, and the girls too, just that I can't speak for the girls, I wasn't on their side of the building. None of us ever were loved in those schools. Instead, we faced everyday, daily denigration, stripping away our sense of decency and dignity, feeling absolutely no value, no right to be here as little children. And by the time we got through those schools, however long we were there, we didn't all stay there for the same length of time. By the time we were leaving, we absolutely believed in our worthlessness. Most of us, many of us. I suppose some might have made it, I don't know for sure. But to be there after 11 years in a residential school, and I'm standing at the top of the stairway of that building, looking out over the ocean, and the thought struck me that I had learned absolutely nothing. I had no hopes, no dreams, no inspiration, no belief in myself, couldn't love myself because of that. And I think to myself, how could we have gone so wrong for so long? What on earth were those people thinking as 150,000 little kids languished in those schools, yearning to be loved and valued and to belong and to be held and caressed? How could we not have known that we would pay the heaviest of consequence down the road? So many lives, little ones, little lives destroyed along the way. Sometimes divine intervention is the only force that can restore grace and dignity. At least for me, it was the only force. The only force. Before I got on that boat, I didn't want to live or die. My drinking had really gone overboard, and my lifestyle was just risky, reckless. I would drink until I passed out and would black out for a day or two or three. Up until that day on the boat in 1975, I was haunted by my experiences of grave harm and loss during my 11 years at St. Michael's School. I carried unresolved trauma that I didn't understand. It was overwhelming for my beautiful wife, Donna, and my precious children, Bob, Frank, Karen, Farrell, and Shelley, my baby. One day they packed up and left. I found myself all alone in our huge house in Campbell River. I responded in the only way I knew how. And even though I had a good job, I drank day after day. The days stretched into weeks, one of the longest binges of my life. I would go out as soon as the bars would open, sometime in the late evening or early hours of the next morning. I would find myself back at home, lying on my bed in the bedroom at the front end of the house, straining to hear my wife's footsteps returning her home, trying to listen for the pitter-patter of my children in the hallway. There was only shattering silence. I would break down and sob myself to sleep. My wife passed away almost a year now. It's a year now. And before I wrote the book, I really had a long talk with her because it's her book too. It's her life, it's our family. And I really didn't want to write it without her blessing. She said, well, just don't tell them everything. And so this book, as I read it tonight, is dedicated to her. One day, as I was walking in a stupor in downtown Campbell River, I ran into an old friend of mine, Sandy. I had been a crew member on a Seine fishing boat for a couple of seasons. "Wait up, Bob," he hollered. "I want to talk to you." I was reluctant to face him. Such was my sense of shame and embarrassment at what I had become, and so I kept walking. "I don't like what you are doing to yourself," Sandy said gently. "You should come fishing with me just to get out of town. You know from before where the boat Chief Y is moored. Go directly down there and sleep it off. We'll pull out early in the morning." I don't know how or when I boarded Sandy's boat. The next morning, I opened my eyes and didn't know where I was. I remembered my meeting up with Sandy. The gravity of my predicament sank in. I was filled with self-loathing and self-pity. I was engulfed in a sense of darkness, and I smelled the foul booze oozing through my pores. When you're an alcoholic like I had become, you give up, you quit living. You don't want any relationships, not really, because you can't stand yourself, you can't stand anybody else. You don't want to expose your vulnerabilities to others, so you close in on yourself and become isolated. You never trust yourself to get closer to other people. You want to be invisible. I was 6 years old when I got dropped off at St. Michael's. Like many children, too young to understand and cope with what they experienced. I happened to be a victim of all forms of abuse that took place there. 2 decades later, after I had graduated from the school, the same memories would return, and my tendency was to drink. Everything on the surface was going well. The job, the house, the family. On the surface, I wasn't feeling too badly about myself. But like a soldier back from war, I didn't know how to handle those flashbacks. It started with drinking on a weekend, then the weekend would turn into Monday or Tuesday. I did what I always did. I got dressed, went downtown, and drank again. By the time Sandy took me aside and told me to get on a fishing boat, my life was meaningless. I had been destined to be a broken human with no hope. In that millisecond, when I heard that voice telling me I was loved, I realized that I had given way to all of the hate and all of the cruelty and harm of residential schools. I had descended into so much darkness, but I was loved. I was loved. Vision or a message from the Creator, I don't know really. When I saw all of this brilliant universe, and that I was told that I was a part of it, then I knew that I did belong somewhere, even for people like me who had descended into so much darkness. I suddenly knew that we would rise above the darkness to bring light to ourselves and also to others. Deep in the recesses of my mind, I accepted that even though I was very broken, ravaged by racism and personal denigration, this vision gave me the courage and the momentum I needed. This vision became ingrained in my deep consciousness to acknowledge that I was me, that I was loved, that I belonged there, that I was connected to all these things, the ocean, the forest, the heavens. But old habits die hard sometimes. I crept back to my bunk and slept for a little while. Eventually, that day, after we fished, we headed back to port. I borrowed a few dollars from each of our crew members with a clear intention to drink at one of the bars that evening. I found a bar, sat down in the darkest corner that I could find, and proceeded to drink. Something was wrong. I wasn't feeling it. I couldn't reach a high to escape. Finally, closing time was fast arising, and I was still dead sober. I pushed myself away from the table and walked home to my empty house that I was trying to avoid because it was too painful to be there. I eventually fell asleep, and it was the best sleep that I'd ever had then or now. I've never taken a drink since then. It would be another 20 years or so before I really thought about that vision and what it meant. By 20 years later, of course, I was involved with residential school survivors, healing projects, and supporting people in court cases one by one. And in looking for ways to resolve the issue of residential schools, I knew that vision would carry me through all of the work. There was so much despair among so many people, so much hopelessness. And this vision, it had come to be at the very heart of my deep, deep consciousness. I knew that in spite of what I had done to myself, I was a part of all of this, and I was loved. If I remember those words, then I have value and I have purpose. If I remember that vision, I belong and I'm loved and I'm connected to everybody and everything. It was a subconscious countering of the suffering that I had gone through at St. Michael's. All of the times that I was told I was worthless, had no value, that I was too dumb, and that I was a pagan. that I'd never amount to anything. I was a child of an attempted genocide. Canada was and is preoccupied only with my economic worth and potential productivity. And so I was asked, I was forced, I was meant to comply with the killing of the Indian in me. The killing of my soul, my culture, and my language. And if not those essential parts of my being, then the killing of my body. All that I was, all that my family was, the fullness of our true human worth was sapped away. My spirit diminished, the light dimmed from within me. If I would not accede to being an economic cog in the wheel of a violent new vision of the world, I would perish, and there would be no recourse for my family, and no newcomer would care. This genocidal path was set in motion from residential school to residential school, and then from child to parent and parent to child. But it did not have to be that way. I did not have to succumb to the depths, to the worst of humanity. And if I did not, we did not. And if I did not even then, we do not even now. As I slowly begin to open my own eyes about our history and what was happening to other children across the country who went through those residential schools, I realized that we all needed to find some salvation from it. We needed to find a way to move from darkness to light. The words I heard in a singular moment of clarity offered hope, not only for me, but for others. In spite of what we have experienced, we are each part of all of this, and we are loved, all of you. Most of us who left residential schools lost a big part of ourselves. Some of us felt as we were nothing, seeing ourselves through the restrictive lenses of those who would wish us to be either supplicants or dead. And so when we left and we went out into the world and tried to be like normal people, we could never be. We had not healed yet. We had not built ourselves up again. We had to get to a point where this transformation could really, really take place. You see, we all discover ourselves in moments where we can find our own voice to elevate the dimension of who we are, from brokenness to healing. What changed for me in that moment on the boat, and it was immediate, was the idea that I wasn't worthless and that I belonged to the human race. Over time, in that sense of belonging, I knew I had responsibilities. As a member of the human race, it was my responsibility to talk about my experience, to talk about equality, inclusion, and love versus hate. This understanding underpinned my thought process going forward, so that eventually I was ready for the work in which I found myself. These were actual tools that became embedded in my psyche, subconscious or not, that I would need to remember to share with others who had gone through what I had gone through, but had not yet found any enlightenment around them. The message is simple: create beauty and power and resilience. Do for ourselves, regain our dignity, self-respect, and pride. So I wonder, maybe we could take one or two questions and we can read another chapter or so after. Anybody got questions? Oh, where's Farrell? This is my son, Farrell, because I don't hear well. Sometimes he needs to hear you and tell me.
All right. Maybe we'll start with a question from our book club that our libraries put on prior to tonight's event. So, can I read this? On the back of your book, you write, "Reconciliation belongs to everyone." What does that mean to you, and why is it important to feature it so prominently on the book?
Yep.
I sure do.
Which one?
In your book, you talk about the power of
Number one. Oh, okay. On the back of my book, I write, reconciliation belongs to everyone. Every Canadian, of every color, of every creed, of every race, of every gender, everyone. So that's pretty clear. This is a really good question. What does the statement mean to you, and why is it so important to feature it so prominently in the book? A number of years ago, I went to Rome. They had a delegation of indigenous people going to see the Pope, and we were seeking an apology from the Pope before the current one. And the night before we were actually at the Vatican, we had a meeting among us, and all of our leaders were speaking, and they got people like me, gave me a chance to speak. And I said, it is so ironic that we're here in Rome, and down the street is the Vatican. And millions upon millions of Christian Roman Catholics believe in this Vatican and the Catechism and everything about it, and the Pope, the current Pope. So that tells me, I said to them, that we're really in a spiritual space. We all can be spiritual, indigenous, non-indigenous, every color, race, creed, we all can be spiritual. So I was trying to make the point to my colleagues that in that moment, the space we all had getting ready for the next day to meet the Pope really was a sacred time. So the next thought that fell to me was that if this is so, then we need to create a spiritual covenant, not just a political covenant, not just a legal covenant, not just an economic covenant. We all understand those things, but we had to, person to person, reach between us an understanding, even beyond understanding, that would hold us together in the agreement we would reach through reconciliation. That if we found love, we'd pass it on to somebody, or you'd receive love. If you believed in equality and justice, you were an advocate and you worked hard for that. But most of all, if we could break through and see each other as human beings, look each other in the eye, give a nod. We're even afraid sometimes to look each other in the eye, and we shouldn't be. And so I thought that's why it was really important to place an emphasis on reconciliation belonging to everybody, not just for Aboriginal, Indigenous, Métis people. Of course that's true, it belongs to them too. But how can we stay the course if we reduce a spiritual, sacred covenant to being simply, again, what we've always done, negotiated settlements legally, politically, economically, and so on. This time, it had to be different. And it had to be different because we wanted it to be a sustaining reconciliation. And I've always held that view. I hold it today. That unless we do this heart to heart, mind to mind, eyeball to eyeball, understanding each other, and really listening to each other and respecting each other and agreeing together in spirit, we have a real chance of making this country the country I described before, one of the best anywhere in the world. And so reconciliation belongs to all of us. But there's another element to that statement. We, in our work, Reconciliation Canada advocates that Canadians, everyone who wants to engage in reconciliation, ought to embrace reconciliation as a core value. You live it, you breathe it every day. You have reconciliation action plans, and it becomes you. You want to be the person that's the best person that you can be, but you pass it on to your neighbors, and they alike reciprocate. I think that's the ideal element of reconciliation, is to get beyond the political, the economic, and the legal arguments, land title, and everything else. Although they're very important and we're going to do them, we could do them without even talking about reconciliation. But we are talking about reconciliation, so let's think about it in the context that it comes with the state having a higher consciousness about who we are to each other. We're honest, we're open, we're transparent, we're committed to each other. We never give ourselves a chance to think like this. We're so busy advancing our personal, individual, family sort of well-being that we can't see beyond the periphery of that and make it wide and completely open for everybody that you know and for everything that you do and say. And one of the real important, one more little specific. If tonight you go home and you've heard some of what I've said and you agree that reconciliation ought to be a core value and you're going to do your best at wherever level you're starting to engage in a process of reconciliation, make a back pocket reconciliation action plan. All of you can do that. None of us in this room do not have the are absent of capacity to be caring for others. So maybe tomorrow in your reconciliation action plan, maybe it's just one item tomorrow. You remember the homeless person on the corner you pass by, he or she every day, and you sort of take a wide little path around them. Tomorrow, as a part of your reconciliation action plan, you're going to take a second and lock eyes with that homeless person, and you nod. You know how huge that is? You might be saving his life. He might feel that he's just reconnecting again with humanity in some small way for the first time in a long time. So we can, while we're creating our understanding on our own personal action plans to engage in reconciliation, we can do all of that. But we have to remember, if we stop doing anything at all, then we're probably worse off than before. One more question. Oh, you should give me a sense of time, too. I could go on all night, right?
We do. We have a couple more questions. Anybody in the room before I read out the book club questions?
Thank you. One of the things that we do here with our education is teach our children the history of Canada and the the hard truths about what our Indigenous people have experienced here in Canada. And a lot of our youth, they become consumed with anger. And it's hard to, that's not a place we want them to be, is stuck in that anger. It's okay to be angry because we absolutely, it was an injustice. But what advice would you give to help us to, or help our young people to move from that anger into reconciliation?
Yeah, I really think, I know what you mean. A lot of young people are, because they don't, well, even in my case, way back then when I was a young person, way back then, I was so angry because I couldn't understand how I could be treated the way I was, why people thought about me, the way they thought about me. And I felt so hopeless, so meaningless and powerless, and I couldn't change that. Well, of course I couldn't change it because I didn't speak to anybody. I didn't find a colleague or a friend or an uncle or a support worker or anybody in society who's empathetic and wants to help. I didn't even want to talk to them. And I think the way for the young people to proceed beyond where they are is to learn how to be open and to reach out and hear others. One of the things I discovered really quickly was I wasn't alone. I always thought, no, it's poor me. There's just me, nobody cares. And then when I found out there were so many others who felt the same way, we began to talk. And we began to define solutions to our situations, right? Healing. Nobody ever talked about healing before we left that school. Nobody ever, let alone talk about love while we were in school. And we began to recognize we had so many things in common. Just for everybody in the audience, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, that's how I think we really have lost our connection to the notion that there is a common humanity. There are more things we have in common than everybody in this room realizes. And it's only because we don't think about it, we don't talk about it, we don't exchange ideas about it, we don't reach out to each other about it, that we're not breaking through to establish that global sort of sense of commonality, that we're all born equal, that we all have value, that we all have purpose. And I think dialogue is just so important. And I have to tell you, I've been watching, they're not kids anymore, but they're young people, right? I'm so impressed. I'm so moved at their intelligence, their spirit, and their desire to change others, to change things, to make things better, and to find value in themselves. Most of the young people really get lost when they think they have no value, no purpose. And it's so important. We all can't have visions, but we all can talk to each other, Yeah. Okay.
All right, one last question from online. In your book, you talk about the power of official apologies. I feel like there's another apology that needs to be given from the monarchy. It seems to me that the genocide of Indigenous peoples was ultimately in the name of the Crown. Do you believe that an official apology from the current head of state would help Canadians reconcile with the darkest aspects of the country's past? Do you think it would help to create a healthier future for Canadians and people of all colonized countries?
When Prime Minister Harper made his apology in the House of Commons, I happened to be with 3 other survivors who sat with him for a whole half day, and he wanted to know from us what we thought would be important enough to be included in the apology. And all the while he's asking this question, and I'm thinking, you son of a gun, you're just pretending. I didn't believe it to be sincere or true, and I believe he was politicking, and that it would mean nothing. And I heard all the other church apologies too. And by the way, I work with a lot of the church entities, and they struggled really hard. Nobody believed them neither about apologies or doing the right thing. And the reason why I'm saying this is to illustrate to you that we all can change, no matter how difficult we think it is to address problems or talk to other people about these things that plague us. There's always room and opportunity if we can have that dialogue that creates that understanding that we're going to change. And so I've come to believe really, really strongly that apologies are significantly important. Lots of Indigenous people don't believe that. They think it's just a waste of time. All the naysayers saying in unity about the BS that comes with some of the apologies. But for me, what I began to understand over time, listening to apologies from the Prime Minister, from the churches, from now the two popes, that every apology has significance. It's an admission by the entity apologizing that these things happened, that wrong was committed, that harm was suffered. And none of these apologies are ever complete or whole and masterful. But I think they're all incremental confessions of the harm and loss that we've suffered. And they're like building blocks. Every apology has led to something. When the churches first started apologizing, there was no really clear evidence that there would be action followed by those apologies. The same with the papal apologies too. And every time there was an apology, everybody demanded, well, apologies, words are not enough. There has to be action following that. And so all of those, when I look at apologies, are building blocks. And it's important to hear them, and it's important for, I don't know if perpetrator is the wrong word, but for perpetrators to apologize, right? And so when you hear the apologies, there'll always be people for and against. But there's one thing for sure, that there's always something subsequent to that apology that happens. Remember when the recent Pope came to Canada? He was in Alberta, and people were demanding that he utter something about genocide. Well, he made the apologies, and it wasn't until he was almost home back in Rome when he made the statement of apology on the airplane. And so all of these shifts, significant shifts that take place in the process of our country coming to terms with our history, all come incrementally. There's never been a perfect solution, and it's resolved. One more thing I want to say about reconciliation. During that big walk in Vancouver 10 years ago or something, Dr. Martin Luther King's daughter was a guest speaker, and she said, and I just quoted a little bit of what I remember, every generation has to fight for its own freedom. And it's freedom from strife, from loss, from cruelty, from injustice, from inequality. That's what she meant. And because we are who we are as human beings, and will never be perfect, and some will be less perfect than others, there's no utopia. Every generation has to work for its own level of freedom. And so in our time, in your time, this evening, this is your moment to make a difference, to be involved, to be engaged, to reach out to neighbors, and try to create the best circumstance and society for all of us. Is that it? Oh, I can make a closing comment? Okay. So it won't be long. I just wanted to, I don't know if it's 30 or 40 or maybe 50 years ago, I knew Squamish a little bit. I was a young man. I had just left Vancouver. I was a reporter for the Vancouver Sun, and I went to work in Mount Currie. And I got to know this country a little. Beautiful country, beautiful people, but the same as in all beautiful people groups, a lot of misunderstanding, not enough dialogue, not enough respect for each other. We can do this. And I come to this beautiful Squamish area, and I see people turning out to listen to an old man talk about his book and some of his hopes and dreams. I think that's of real value. So I want to thank everybody that showed up tonight. And I hope when you, just before you fall asleep, you think about what it is that you're going to do to contribute to the elevation of ourselves, our common humanity, our Squamish, and wherever you all live. And it can happen, and it's timely. There are so many Canadians across this country who are just keen to be involved and are involved. So I hope to read about good things from here. This beautiful place. You're so lucky to be here and to live in this valley that's full of people yourselves. You have good neighbors. These Indigenous people, I know them all. They're beautiful people. They're kind, they're gentle, they're loving, they're caring, they're welcoming. And I know it's sometimes hard for us Indigenous people to think about being all of those things when we want our land back, right? Or some fairness about responding to land acquisition. And so, but I think here, there's a spirit of togetherness and working forward. And I'm really moved by that. Thank you for listening. And I'm going to be signing a few books more if there are some people who have books to sign. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We so appreciate you being here. Thank you, thank you. That experience of hearing you read that first chapter is something that I will not soon forget. Little Bookshop is here. If you haven't gotten a copy of the book yourself, you can buy one right now. And just a note on the book signing, Chief Joseph is happy to sign books, but let's keep the line moving and keep it going at a nice clip. Thank you, everybody, for joining online. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you in the lobby.
Thank you.